once again to the first in a series of environmental-based all candidates debates. My name's Marita Prado, I'm with the Dogwood Initiative, and there's been a coalition of local environmental groups that have put together this series. So those include Sierra Club, BC Chapter, Polis Project on Ecological Governance, BC Sustainable Energy Association, and Conservation Voters of BC. And so I'm gonna, without further ado, pass us along to our moderator. Our moderator today is James Lawson. James is a professor in the political science department here at UVic, and he focuses on Canadian government, environmental policy, and Canadian political economy. So here's James.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, and welcome to the first of 3 environmental all-candidates debates. We'll be starting off this afternoon with an introduction of our candidates, and then we'll be giving them 3 minutes to speak about themselves, their party, and the environment. After the candidates' introduction, I will begin to open up the question period, first by asking the candidates to respond to a question put forward by a local environmental nonprofit organization, and those will be directed at all of the candidates. And then a question from the audience that, if at all possible, should be directed at one candidate. Each candidate will have up to a minute to answer the question, and up to a minute to rebut questions directed at one candidate. The afternoon will continue more or less this way, with a mix alternating between questions from the local organizations and questions from the floor. If you want to ask a question during that period, please come up to the mic, this one, or flag down Charles Campbell, standing here, who will bring you a pen and a piece of paper for you to write down your answer, and that question will come to me. Please try to keep your questions succinct and make sure that the questions are indeed related to tonight's topics of the environment. At 3:15, I will stop asking any more questions, and I will ask for 2-minute closings from each of the candidates. I'm looking forward to hearing the many points of view expressed tonight, as indeed I'm sure everyone in the audience is. I'm sure we would all agree that it would be valuable to us all if there were a respectful and balanced tone to the proceedings, which means to limit the personal attacks and to keep your questions and answers within the time limits. And finally, we don't mind theatrical sighs, skeptical coughs, applause, but we would like to ensure that that doesn't become a disruptive factor so that the candidates can all speak to the issues they want to bring to us tonight. So thank you all for taking part, and now on with the show.
Do we need to have all of the lights on, speaking of the environment?
This is being filmed. I'm open to direction. I think the filming equipment will need some balance in the room.
We tried to turn off the lights and it was sort of an all off or all on, but if anyone knows any secret that we don't about this room, then we'd be happy to do that. Did you want to just mention that there is a timer as well? Yes,
perhaps we could experiment a bit. Rachel will be doing the timing for this event. At 30 seconds, the following sound will ring. And at the end of your allotted time, the following sound will ring. And I've been asked to be absolutely ferocious in keeping us on time, so I will then intervene to ask you to wind up. Very good then. To introduce briefly in alphabetical order, Jeremy Arney from the Canadian Action Party, Dale P. Lear from the Libertarian Party, Andrew Lewis from the Green Party, and Brian E. Penn from the Liberal Party. And an invitation was issued to Gary Lunn from the Conservative Party, and unfortunately we haven't heard from that candidate. So we have an otherwise complete candidates list. Thank you. So perhaps we could begin then, beginning with Mr. Arney, beginning your 3 minutes of remarks. Thank you.
Oh, it does work. Does work. Can you hear me all right? Excellent. Is there anybody here who's responsible for that wonderful car out there with the enormous nose on the gentleman who's running us? And if you haven't seen it, go to the parking lot. It's fantastic. Anyway, my name is Jeremy Arney. I'm with the Canadian Action Party. And for those of you who haven't heard of the Canadian Action Party, our main reason for being is to represent people to Ottawa and not Ottawa to the people. Having said that, our major priority is retaining Canada as Canadian, retaining a country that is free and able to conduct their own business in their own way without any oversights from any corporations or any other country. That is our major platform. The second major platform is the economics in the form of using the Bank of Canada to finance what we need to finance. It's our bank. We can use it. It has been used extremely successfully in the past. It is not now. We're heavily in debt to commercial banks. We've got that out of the way. We do have very strong opinions on the environment. I needed to say all that part because that is our major platform. But the environment, oh yes, one of my babies is the environment. For instance, some of you may have seen this before. It's a map of Canada. There are 16 dots on it. And on the other side, there are 14 mines that are trying to use those lakes to turn them into tailing ponds for their mines. This means that those mines will become completely toxic. They'll have things like cyanide, arsenic, lime, sulfuric acid in them. And I don't know how many people have been around when a swimming pool in the backyard has been filled up with a water hose. But if you've seen this happen, you tell me that the water on those little pools is completely static. Is it? No. Turbulent. So anything that's put into one of those tailing ponds, now known as lakes, is going to go all over the place. The water is going to mix up. The fish, they don't stand a chance. They're going to be muddled up with all this. Outside of those lakes, there are people living. First Nations people living there. And what are they going to do? Now their water is going to be completely toxified. The fish are going to be inedible. There are going to be no wildlife coming down to feed there so that they can, to drink there so that they can hunt them. It just snowballs on. There's an apology being issued on one half for the residential schools, and on the other hand, there's 90 to 100 years of complete desecration of their ability to live. So, you know, what are you balancing against what? I'm told by the Fisheries Ocean and the Environment and Mr. Lunn, thank you, that there is a possibility that they can build fresh ponds for the fish to live in. Now, how are you going to replace a beautiful, thousands, millions of years old ecology by building another pond and expecting those fish to miraculously get from there to there and still be edible? Doesn't work. That's it. My time, I think, is just about up. If it's not, I am.
Mr. Lear from the Libertarian Party.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it's nice to see a good turnout. My name is Dale Lear, and I'm probably your least reluctant candidate in this proceedings. I'm not a politician by nature or by choice, but what I am concerned about is what I see as a lack of variety in the debate that concerns the issues that we're all focused upon, and certainly the environment is one of them. Now, if any of you don't know anything about the Libertarian Party, basically our primary platform is the recognition of individual and property rights. We believe that without economic freedom, there is no such thing as political freedom, and that's something that we should all cherish and value. Our party has 6 basic platforms, in no particular order. We believe in defunding abortion. Now, what I mean by that is we recognize that individuals have every right to do what they wish with their bodies. It's none of the government's business. However, we equally believe that it's not an obligation of the taxpayer to fund individual choices. On marijuana, we are in favor of legalization for the same reasons. Basically, we have a lot of violence in our cities. We have millions and billions of dollars flowing into organized crime, and prohibition has been proven not to work in the past, and it'll never work in the future. In fact, our leader, Dennis Young, is a member of the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and so he speaks from experience in this area. We also believe that our whole tax code has gotten enormously complicated to the point where nobody really knows anymore what direction all the tax dollars are flowing, and that is essentially counterproductive. So we believe in a visible single flat tax, which is not the same as a flat earth. As far as the gun registry, I don't know if any of you folks have ever lived in wilderness or remote areas, but they are a necessity and a fact of life for folks. Firearms are rather. And Mr. Lunn, who, my good friend Gary, isn't here today, but in fact he voted for the gun registry, which has turned out to be a multi-billion-dollar boondoggle, which as we can see has not made our streets a whole lot safer. As to health care, we believe once again in the fundamental right of individuals to make choices about the things that govern their bodies and their health. And again, we think that it's entirely acceptable for people to enter into common agreements for their own purposes, but again, it should also be the right of individuals to select their insurers and healthcare providers if they see fit. And then also we think that their economy is being severely hurt by the flip-flops by the existing government on such issues as income trusts. That in fact, pensioners' incomes and our savings are at the whim of the government of the day, and they seem to be able to just change their mind at every turn. So again, I'm not a professional politician. I'm just here to try and open up the debate and try and introduce some new ideas so that whatever decisions we collectively come to, we can be satisfied at least that we've explored all the alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Trip myself up. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out, and thank you to the organizers for this environmental forum, because I've run as a candidate now for this is my fourth run, my third time as a federal candidate for the Green Party. I'm running, by the way, in Spanish Gulf Islands. This is the first time that we've ever had, that I've ever been involved in an environmental forum. So that's really encouraging. What is a little bit discouraging is to actually see so few people here, when this really is one of the most critical issues of our time. Now, I have a confession to make here. When I run as a candidate for a Green, I tend not to talk much about the environment, because people seem to think that the Green Party is a one-issue party. It's about the environment. And I said, no, 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 we've got to talk about economics. We've got to talk about social services. So it's a little bit refreshing here to be able to talk about the environment, and because I appreciate that by coming out here today, you already appreciate the connections between environment and our quality of life and a future for our children. And that's, for me, what it's all about. When we go and vote on October 14th, we're not really voting for ourselves, we're voting for future generations. And that's why I'm so attracted to the Green Party, because our vision is long-term. It's not just the election cycle, the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's about what kind of a vision have we got for Canada? Where are we going, and how do we get there from here? And that's what Vision Green is about. That's our policy platform, and it lays out concrete solutions on how to build a more sustainable Canada. And sustainability, for me, is the bottom line. It's not environment. We tend to silo environment as a one-issue cause. Really, for me, it's about sustainability and how do we build a sustainable community which respects our greater landscape. So you might wonder, what are the differences between the Greens and other parties? I think the fundamental thing, other than sustainability, is that we believe we need to move to a steady state economy. We cannot continue our economic state, which is all about exponential growth. We can't continue to grow our consumption and production in the world. We need to find ways to move towards a steady state economy. And again, Vision Green outlines a series of ideas which will help us move towards a sustainable economy, sustainable communities. And look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, it's also very wonderful to be back here. I'm usually here in my capacity as a lecturer, as I'm an adjunct professor at the Environmental Studies program and in the Restoration program and the Geography department here at UVic. So I've been here for 15 years. And I think one of the first things I want to do is acknowledge that we're on Lekwungen territory, and to thank the Songhees for allowing us to gather here today. Cheryl Bryce is the great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of the chief that signed the original Douglas Treaty, which essentially maintained resources but not actually title to land. And that's one of the great initiatives that I worked on here at the University of Victoria, was being part of the first camas harvest and feast with the Lekwungen people, just about 5 minutes away from here. And we gathered the camas that was still growing, which is a beautiful bulb crop. It's like the potato. We gathered it one day, put it in a pit and roasted it and ate it with the Lekwungen elders. And I mention that because restoration, biodiversity, health, very important part of the diet was these camas, because they don't cause diabetes like our potatoes do. But the connection on that day between culture, between ecosystem and rare and endangered species protection, and the health of Aboriginal people, and the health of community, and the role of education and an economic diversity, all came together for me on that day. It was a very profound day, and any of you who know Cheryl Bryce, who's actually a student at in the restoration program, will know how profound that was. It was the first time that Lekwungen people had gathered and eaten camas from the lands that they had, originally cared for and stewarded. So the reason also that I'm so grateful to the Dogwood for holding this is that I can talk about stewardship. Like Andrew, it's been so painful to have this incredible platform put out by the Liberal Party and not be able to talk about it. I know that we were at all candidates held by the Chamber of Commerce, and I had to field 2 questions on the McTavish overpass in a 5-question debate. And I felt like saying, why are we talking about a McTavish overpass when we're talking about the future of the world, So one of the things I just want to point out is that nature is back on the mainstream political platform, and I'm just going to briefly give you an overview of some of the highlights of the Liberal platform. One of them is there's a commitment to protect 50% of Canada's wild intact areas. That's the boreal forest, the Great Bear Forest. And this is going to be done through an innovative strategy that includes completing our protected area system, looking at carbon stewardship. So, more later.
So at this point, we will turn to the floor and to prepared questions from some of the sponsoring organizations. And I will start to randomize who I call upon in a randomized order. Feel free to pass and collect your thoughts if that's helpful to you, candidates. So let me begin with a question from the Dogwood Initiative, which goes to all of the candidates. Do you and your party support a ban on all bulk oil tankers through BC's north coast, specifically those servicing pipelines from the tar sands to Kitimat? And you have 1 minute each to respond. Shall we start then with Jeremy Arney?
Sure. Oh, we did that with it. Okay. Definitely not. We've got to keep that ban in place. Okay, I guess it's working. We've got to go back actually to the basics of why this is even being thought about being broken, and that is that through NAFTA, we are obliged to send 60% of the oil production that our wonderful country produces down to the United States. The oil sands in Alberta are now producing to the point where we can no longer send 60% of our oil down through the pipelines. They won't take it, they're full. So what are the options that the federal government is faced with? Oil tankers. We have to cut back on production from Alberta one way or another. I don't care which way it is, we've got to cut back so we don't have to ship that oil through tankers in a very dangerous and beautiful area.
Thanks very much.
Yes, the Green Party and myself support a legislated ban on oil tankers off our coast here. We believe that shipping oil off our coast is a dead-end future for the coastal communities and for BC and for Canada at large. And that, just a quick example, for every 100 oil and gas jobs, there would be 500 in clean renewables, and that is the future for BC. We also have to acknowledge that our coastal waters around here is an ecological hotspot, and we need to do everything we can to protect it, because really, seriously, the ecological crisis that we face around the world, we will only get through the next 100 years by protecting these valuable ecological hotspots.
The Liberals brought this moratorium in 35 years ago, and they've committed to a legislated ban on this, because if Gary Lunn is incapable of observing the moratorium, then we'll have to spell it out in an order in council for him. He seems to be confusing the public with his baffle-gab on this voluntary exclusion zone. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was up in Haida Gwaii doing a half-hour documentary called Oil and Water Don't Mix. And there was a very amazing thing happened, is that we were sitting down to a big feast of all the seafood that's gathered around the Haida shores. And it was crab and salmon and sea cucumbers and seaweed. And one of the elders stood up and she took a can of oil and she poured it over the dinner. And it was the most graphic thing you could ever have imagined. And she said, "Would you pour oil over your dinner?" That's the position of the Haida Nation. And that is my position. That is Stéphane Dion's position. And we need to go further. We've got to tackle the big elephant, which is the Athabasca tar sands. Mr. Dion's committed to axing all subsidies to the tar sands, bringing in a carbon tax, and finding alternatives to oil.
Thank you. And here I have a question directed from the floor to Bryony Penn. And I'm reading here.
Excuse me?
Yes. Oh, Dale.
Yes.
Beg your pardon. Dale Lear, I beg your pardon.
Well, I wouldn't mind, because I'm probably the only one that actually has a different opinion. The Libertarian Party is actually quite clear on this. We would not ban the shipment of bulk oil through the northern coastal waters of BC. And before everybody expresses a shock and horror, let me explain why. What you have to understand is actually the economy, the environment, and energy are inextricably linked. It's almost like, service, price, and quality. Pick any two. Now, it's not quite as black and white as that, but what a lot of folks that speak about banning conventional oil production forget is just how much energy the world uses. And in fact, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around the idea of 1 million or 1 billion barrels of oil. But just to give you an idea of what it would take to replace 1/3 of our fossil fuel usage, 20,000 nuclear power plants, 32,850 wind power turbines a year for 50 years, or 91,250,000 solar rooftop panels a year for 50 years, or 4 Three Gorges dams. That's how much fossil would replace 1/3 of our fossil fuels. So we have to be realistic.
Okay. Thank you very much, and apologies again. Very good. So on to the question that I jumped too quickly to. For Bryony Penn, Gary Lunn, I'm reading, doesn't care that nuclear reactors float around his riding and cross BC ferry routes on their way to Nanoose. Do you consider U.S. subs and aircraft carriers an environmental hazard?
Oh, great question. I would love to follow up on this question. I actually haven't thought about it, not in my capacity as a Liberal candidate, so I haven't even had a chance to think. But one thing you will know is that if I go to Ottawa, these questions are going to come up over and over again, and you can be sure that we need people on committees to address these and understand the full ramifications of a lot of these issues. I've got 30 seconds to... So let me first talk about the nuclear issue, because I think that's going to be one of the hottest topics that's going on within the Liberal caucus and indeed the Liberal Party, for some of the reasons that our libertarian here has pointed out. That's why it's important that we've got to get people at the table who are really able to get this whole energy question, build in the discussion of, and I'm going to build in the discussion of what are our alternatives and what are the ramifications of each of these energy types, and that builds into the defense question. Thank you.
Can I? For this format, we have rebuttal time, so starting then with music.
That's an interesting question, and the place where I want to go with this is that the Liberals and then the Conservatives have started a process called SPP, Security and Prosperity Partnership. And what that means in part is deep integration with the US. It means incremental integration with the United States, and that includes military integration. So if you support the Liberal Party, you're supporting nuclear power subs around our coast. It's part of the process of SPP, which the Liberals started.
Can I have a rebuttal?
Perhaps I should ask first if there are other voices to speak.
Thank you for bringing that up, Andrew. Actually, back on the 14th of February of this year, there was an agreement between the Commander-in-Chief of the American Forces and the Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Forces, between the two of them, that at any given time they could invite the opposition military to cross the border and help them out. Now, you probably never heard about that. The American people never heard about that. It never came before the Senate or the Congress or the House of Parliament. It was a military deal. It was not between the people. So when we start talking about trying to do anything at all about keeping nuclear subs and nuclear warships out of our coast, we're talking to a government who really doesn't give a damn.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I think
Oh,
Mr.
yeah,
Lear
sorry.
wants to speak.
I'm used to it. Listen, you know, the Libertarian Party is a very clear platform of not engaging in imperialistic and foreign adventures. I would simply say that what we need to do is concentrate on building up our own armed forces, because until we're prepared to defend ourselves, we're pretty much stuck under the U.S. umbrella. So to me, that's the first step forward. If you want to change this issue, we need to strengthen our own defenses.
And so, Brian, you can quickly. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify the whole thing about the Security and Prosperity Partnership. It was brought in by Martin in his term of government. It was meant as an opportunity for the three leaders of the United States, Canada, and Mexico to discuss trade and look at various aspects of trade. That in and itself is not a bad thing. If you've got a commitment from all three leaders that they're going to be transparent, they're going to be democratic, and that they're actually going to take any recommendations made at these discussions back to their parliaments and be put through a proper due process in Parliament. That's a commitment from Mr. Dion. Whether it's useful, have we had enough? Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Turning now to one of the organizational questions, which are again directed to all candidates. Today, Canadians recognize that the economy and the environment are two sides of the same coin. Our tax policies often subsidize economic behavior that damages the environment and the climate by propping up damaging development, such as in the tar sands, instead of driving investment in more sustainable approaches. Countries such as Denmark, Germany, and Sweden have all implemented models of the carbon tax and have seen greenhouse gas emission levels drop. So with that, the question is, will your party institute carbon pricing through carbon taxes and/or a cap-and-trade system for greenhouse gas emissions and use the proceeds to finance further actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And perhaps I could start with Mr. Lear, if you're...
Well, the question is absolutely correct. There is a close relationship between the economy and the environment and in energy. When you reduce your energy consumption, you reduce your environmental footprint. It's pretty much a straightforward trade-off. The problem is that we currently use an enormous amount of energy, and again, it's really hard for people to get their minds around that. And it's just not a simple process of using tax policy to subsidize or redirect resources. That's where a free and healthy functioning economy will make sure that the economic winners that generate the money that we need for things like healthcare, for education, for the clean environment, and for law enforcement are in place. So which ones do you want to give up? I mean, the economic pot is only so big. And one of the things where the Libertarian Party differs from all the other brands is that we believe that the economy should be able to sort itself out. Now, nothing killed SUV sales faster than a short spike in oil prices. And everybody here probably believes that there's such a thing as called peak oil. The solution will present itself shortly.
Brian E. Penn?
There was two parts to the question. I wonder if you could just repeat it.
The question itself was, will your party institute carbon pricing through carbon taxes and or a cap and trade system for greenhouse gas emissions, and use the proceeds to finance further actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Okay, the Liberal Party are proposing both. They're proposing a carbon tax, it's called the Green Shift, and it's trying to tackle poverty by cutting income taxes for lower to middle income people and shifting those taxes onto pollution waste. So, you know, don't tax what you earn, tax what you burn. The method of financing investment in the alternative technologies is to do a cap and trade, so that companies, they're capped at a certain level. If their emissions are higher, they pay a big hefty fine. That fine goes into an investment trust, which they can then use to do the research on their own alternative technologies. And there's a lot of other measures designed to try and promote investment in alternative green technologies. But it's both. It's a combination of cap and trade and carbon tax.
Thank you. And Andrew Lewis? Yep.
The Green Party is offering an integrated approach to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, and our targets that we are proposing are 85% below 1990 levels by 2040. And out of those 17 points, one includes a carbon tax, and the other does include cap and trade on large final emitters. I'd like to compare and contrast carbon taxes that the Greens propose and what the Liberals are proposing. The Greens are proposing $50 a tonne on carbon, straight up, straight away, with no exemptions. The Liberals are proposing a more incremental approach, $10 a tonne going up to 40. And for me, and with a whole bunch of loopholes that you could drive a fleet of SUVs through, it's just, for me, it's like a piece of wet toast what the Liberals are proposing. If they're serious about climate change, if they're serious about putting a price on carbon, then let's get on with it. And at $50 a tonne, we have the Environment Canada last year did a study on what $50 a tonne would do to our economy. And it would actually help improve our economy, not set us back.
Thank you. And Jeremy Arney.
There are way too many facets to this question to answer it in a minute, but I'll give it a shot. First of all, no caps, no taxes, no carbon taxes. Sticks don't work. Carrots, much better idea. How about the Zen motor car, ladies and gentlemen? Anybody ever heard of the Zen motor car? It's an electric car. Right now, we can have them in Oak Bay alone and in downtown Vancouver, I think. That's it. What's the matter? Why can't we all have electric cars? There's a Mitsubishi in Japan that has little dynamos in each corner, and they regenerate the electricity they're using as they're going down the road. So you plug it in once, charge it, you never have to do it again unless you leave it so long that the battery runs out. Why are we not doing things like this? So the incentive is, excuse me, I've been doing way too much talking lately. The incentive is carrots. What do we do for the people so that we can cut down on the generating plants? Solar panels in every roof, enough so that you don't have to pay hydro. If you could be generating enough hydro from your solar panels, very expensive, but we can deal with that at another time, so that you're actually putting hydro back onto the grid. We don't need those dirty, nasty, coal-fired generating plants.
And now a question from the floor, which is directed to all the candidates, should they wish to. Please comment on the following: more private property and stronger property rights would result in less pollution. Okay, that is the question, asking you to comment on that statement. Bryony Penn, would you like to start?
Well, the Liberal Party has stood for, since I think its creation, for a pluralistic society, which means that we have a healthy respect for private property rights, but we also have a very healthy respect for the common. We don't put the individual first, we put society first. That's what distinguishes us from the United States. I know that the current government is very keen to have us become more like the Americans, to the extent that whenever we're debating here with Gary Lunn, he talks about the administration instead of the government. So as far as I'm concerned, a pluralistic government is a far healthier one. There's always a tension between private property rights and public rights, but that tension is what keeps us debating. It keeps us, this society, one of the most civil in the world.
Thank you.
Sorry, Bryony, you took me right off track. What was the question again, please?
The question was to ask for a comment on the following statement: more private property and stronger property rights would result in less pollution.
Possibly. It would also increase the homeless by a huge amount. Oh boy, that's... I'm not really quite sure that I'm figuring out what it is that this question is supposed to go at. But
you'd like us to come back around?
No, I'm going to waffle my way through this, I think, because it seems like a very strange question. I'm not sure what's behind it. And is there room for everybody to have larger properties? We're stuck as it is with too many people living in too small a space. It's going up and up and up. And how are you going to get bigger property if you've got a condo? You're going to extend to the roof, you're going to share the roof. No, I'm not sure that's going to lead to less green. I think it's going to lead to chaos and confusion, and probably the assertion of the gun laws being coming back into place.
Dale,
Well, this is an easy one for me. We definitely believe that increased individual and property rights would lead to greater wealth and would lead to a more productive economy, and that would naturally lead to a cleaner environment. Unlike the other brands, which believe that the authoritarian measures of a state which imposes its will on the population is somehow magically going to make us all better off, is sheer lunacy. That's our position. It's quite simple. Let the economy flow and function as it should, because instead, the government has no magic wand. It doesn't have the ability to simply pick winners. And when they use tax policy to guide investment into areas into which it would otherwise be better put to use, you end up with distortions, you create poverty, and again, without economic rights, there are no political rights.
Thank you. And Andrew Lewis, please.
Just very quickly, I think I can... The Green Party, I don't think, has a stand on this issue, and I'm struggling to find the connection to lower pollution with stronger property rights.
Okay, let me comment. If I own the lake,
can I just quickly finish? Finish, please?
I'm just trying to comment on my question.
Sir, we should let the gentleman speak, and
well,
then
if he doesn't understand the question, I was just helping him along.
Yeah,
let him speak. Okay, if you're willing to.
Well, I just want to close quickly by pointing out, just raising something that Bryony said just now at the opening, that she talked about the Songhees and the clams and the access to resources, and that how that community, for 10,000 years, their title was to resources, not to land. And they live sustainably on the land together. And that is not a Green Party position, but I certainly think we need to look at where our resources come from and assure title to that, and not just to land. Because at the end of the day, we're just stewards on the land, and we never really own land at any time.
Thank you. Now, a question from conservation voters. After NDP candidate Julian West's resignation, there is a pool of NDP supporters who are trying to decide who their vote should go to in this upcoming election. Why should they place their vote with you? Okay, I think that's it. And Andrew Lewis.
Well, I think we all noticed that there is a voice missing in this election, a very important voice, and I respect Julian West for what he's achieved over the years on electoral reform, and that is a critical issue. I mean, Elizabeth May raised that up as her priority in the debates last night. And we know that our electoral system is dysfunctional. It's becoming more and more heightened as each election passes, it seems. So why should NDP voters vote for me? I think because naturally the Green Party has always tended to be the second choice for NDPers. And really, I hope NDPers don't stay home in this election. I hope they think very carefully at how their vote can actually change the course of this election in this riding. They have a lot of power, they have the keys to the result in this riding. I hope they support me and recognize our strong platform and my own credentials, having run that many times in this riding.
Dale Lear.
Okay, you'll notice I sort of in tongue-in-cheek refer to the other major political parties as brands, because have no illusions about it. This is a marketing plan by these parties that want your support so that they can take control of the public purse. I mean, we've seen the federal NDP and the Liberals and the Green Party basically aligned on many of the issues. I don't really see a whole lot of difference between them. Bob Ray, he used to be with the NDP, now he's with the Liberals. The Greens cut a deal with the Liberals. I mean, I'm sorry, but they're really after the same thing. Why should NDP vote for me? Because I have my convictions, and I will do what I say I will do. And I don't have to go back to the mothership to get permission to come up with policy. Our policies are really simple and easy to understand.
Thank you. Jeremy Arney.
That's a fairly difficult question to answer in this particular riding. There is, in case you didn't know it, a little website called Shun Lunn. There's a lot of people here who do not want Mr. Lunn back in under any circumstances. Now, I could pitch the NDP and give them a reason to vote for me, but let's be realistic. The chances of my getting more than about 2 or 3% of the vote in this riding is almost non-existent. So you really have a choice between Bryony or Andrew to make an effective voice and an effective decision in this riding at this time. And I think that's what you have to look at, not the national picture, because you're not voting for a national leader. You're voting for someone to represent you. I'm the ideal person, but I don't stand much of a chance. So now you need to look at these two and decide which of these two is best able to represent you to Ottawa. Not you to their party, not Ottawa to you, but you to Ottawa. That's the decision you have to make. I can't help you on that one. I could, but I won't.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, if there's one thing I know about the NDP, since I was asked by the NDP to run, is that this is a group of people that pretty much walk their talk, and they're out there. They're the activists, they're the people that they're community organizers, they're the raging grannies, they're the people that are really moving and shaking for change. And having worked in the environmental and social justice movement for the last 25 years, I think that the NDP vote will go with the person that has, you know, been out there the longest and is going to represent their values. I would hope that they would consider me. Certainly I've been selected by the Vote for Environment, a national organization, Vote for Climate, a national organization. I was selected by Conservation Voters of BC. Dr. Andrew Weaver, Nobel Prize winner on climate change, has endorsed me, as has Dr. David Boyd, Robert Bateman. I even got a note today that Randy Bachman's endorsing me. So I don't know if that helps to the NDP supporters, but you know, you guys, that I've been there with you, and I think that the NDP know the real thing. Thank you. I just wanted to add, sorry, this is an important, can I just, the proportional representation, I'll take it to a private member's bill if necessary.
Okay. Now a question from the floor, again directed to you all. What can you do about traffic? And the person adds, how many more automobiles are we going to allow on this planet? Give you a couple seconds. And perhaps Bryony Penn.
Wow. Boy, these are some interesting questions. Thank you for that question. I feel like I'm being subjected to the inquiry by a small girl that I met while I was outdoor knocking. And she looked up at me and she said, "Are you the lady that's going to save polar bears?" And I thought, wow, we've got a big, big responsibility on our hands. Am I willing to say how many cars? Am I able to say how many cars are we going to get off the roads? All I know is that there's a team that Stéphane Dion has assembled that is committed to getting the best minds, the best practices from around the world, the best collaborative efforts that we can do to turn this challenge of climate change around. And all I can do is pledge to do my very, very best to get those cars off the road.
Andrew Lewis.
I can't give exact numbers, but we are committed to reducing traffic and reducing cars on the roads, for sure. We need to encourage municipalities and local communities to work towards more livable communities, to be more pedestrian friendly, to be more cycle friendly, and to increase the number of transit. And we have a program for that. So through 1% of GST to be dedicated back to small cities and communities. In fact, the Mayor of Toronto has said that the Green Party plan for restoring our infrastructure, green infrastructure in our communities, is the best one. And so I'm very proud of that. And I'm bothered about the Dion plan. Stéphane Dion, in his leadership race, committed to the $1 billion of federal funding for the Gateway project to increase roads and bridges on the Lower Mainland.
It's not true.
And it's still in the platform.
It's not true.
So we need that $1 billion of funding to go towards increased pedestrian and cycling in our communities.
Thank you. Dale Weir.
Another easy question. You know, it's interesting, for what, 40, 50 years now, we've had alternate liberal and conservative governments. And again, it's the big government top-down approach that's really cause of many of our problems. One of the interesting things is the fact that under both governments, we have had a resistance by Transport Canada to legalize small fuel-efficient vehicles. All you have to do is take a look at what they're driving in Asia and what they're driving in Europe, where they have far less accidents per 100,000 miles driven, far less injuries, and they use far less fuel. They get more cars on the same road space, and I'm sorry, the automobile is still most people's preferred vehicle of choice because it allows individuals to go where they want, when they want. And central planners love public transit because it allows them to suck up huge amount of tax dollars, which they get to hand out like election favors, and it corrals people into predetermined channels. A libertarian government doesn't believe that. We believe in letting the economy grow the way it should and allowing people's lives to go the direction they choose to take them in, not the authoritarians.
Thank you. Jeremy Arney.
So it really boils down to a choice. How do you want to get from one place to another? Do you want to walk? Do you want to cycle? Do you want to go on 4, 6, or 8 wheels? The whole transit system that we have in this town alone is pathetic. About a month and a half ago, it took me 4 hours to get from the airport to Victoria. I mean, that's crazy. I could have walked it in an hour more with just dragging my case down the highway, and I would have saved $3.50. If we don't have a public transit system that people can rely on and want to use, we're not going to get rid of the cars, whether they're electric or not. So let's get a public transport system that people want to use. They don't have to use it, as Dale says. Their choice to use it would be because it's efficient, quick, and cheap. And if we can do that, and we can do it easily, if there's a will, it can be done. Then the number of cars on the road would come down, and you wouldn't have this problem of congestion, pollution, etc., etc., etc.
And now a question from the Polis Project on ecological governance. Evidence from across the country, including recent federal reports on climate and water and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, suggests that Canada could soon be facing national water crises. Changing precipitation and weather patterns, burgeoning urban and industrial water use, and persistent pollution pose threats to water quality and quantity, and in turn to both human and ecosystem health. Water policy experts, scientists, and concerned citizens are all calling for a national water strategy to begin addressing this looming crisis. Now to the questions. Do you and your party agree that Canada needs significant federal re-engagement on water issues? What kind of leadership do you feel is most appropriate for the federal government in creating a national water strategy that supports efforts by provinces and other stakeholders to manage water resources sustainably? Very good. So, with that in mind, perhaps I could ask Dale Leon first.
Well, that's a long question, and I mean, it's a short time, but as one gentleman pointed out, if somebody owns a lake, nobody else is allowed to pollute that. That person has every right to defend the quality of their property. Now, not all property is ever going to be privately owned in this country. It's just not going to happen. We have public property, and it's the obligation of every government to protect that asset on behalf of the citizens. So a libertarian government certainly would not, in any sense, allow the environment to suffer because it was not going to vigorously prosecute polluters. And that's what our court systems are for. And if we're not happy with the way that's working, then maybe we need to strengthen the justice system. But polluters need to be punished. They need to be made to pay. And we as consumers can do that. We can withhold our dollars if we're free to choose who we support in the economy, and we can punish polluters at the checkout counter.
Thank you. Jeremy Arney.
Okay. I'd like to read you something that's sitting right in front of me, apropos of what Dale just said. A joint news release by EcoJustice on June 13, 2008, the Federal Court of Appeal determined that citizens do not have a right to be consulted about proposed large industrial developments. Whoopee, that's another right you just lost. Aren't we lucky? We don't have the right anymore to say, no, we don't want a nuclear plant put right in our back garden. It's not our choice anymore. Great. We're talking about water, shortage of water coming along. We got 16 lakes that are about to be polluted so they're undrinkable. I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about values that we have, that as a country we own these freshwater lakes, and we're doing nothing to protect them. Okay, what did Plato say? Quite a long time ago. I like this quote. I really like it. I've read it a lot. The price of apathy towards public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. We're sitting back and we're really doing nothing. So where are we?
Some of you might remember that for 6 years I worked to save my watershed, our watershed on Salt Spring Island, through the usual means. And at that stage there was no legislation to protect our water or endangered species. And so I was taken to the point where I had to do something drastic, which was civil disobedience, and go down Howe Street and get the media's attention. So people know that I'm pretty committed to the protection of water. The Liberal government's proposing a national water strategy that's going to commit not only to cleaning up water, looking at the quality and quantity of water, ensuring that there's enough for ecosystem survival, but also pledging $400 million as part of that strategy to do all sorts of things, map and protect underwater aquifers, work in conjunction with farms to make sure that they're not draining these areas dry, working on invasive species that have things like the sea lamprey and the zebra mussel. Oh, I'm done. Ban both water experts too.
Can you just go back on this for a second, please?
Perhaps we could have Andrew Lewis and...
I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew. Go ahead.
The Green Party has in Vision Green many proposals on water. This is a critical issue for Canada. We, just as a preface, we're suggesting that we need to keep it, and by what I mean by keeping it, we need to look at NAFTA and ensure that we don't let our water get exported as bulk across the border down south. I think that is a critical issue, and so the Green Party is suggesting that we abrogate NAFTA as one reason is to protect our water. We also need to conserve it, and the federal government needs to be engaged in water metering, for example, because we are one of the biggest wasters of water in the world per capita. And we also need to protect it. We need to protect our watersheds. We need to use the Fisheries Act, for example, to protect our watersheds. And we need to start treating our water as if we mean to stay in Canada. And so please check out Vision Green and look at the myriad of platform positions on water.
Thank you. And Jeremy Arney, you had a brief comment.
Just 2 points on this. First of all, it's a loophole in the Fisheries and Oceans Act that was brought in by the Liberal government that is allowing the Conservative government to do this to these lakes. The Liberals put it in, who knows why. Maybe they were planning to use it later, they didn't, but the Conservatives certainly are. And, you know, water conservation, yes, absolutely essential. But what's the point in water conservation if we're going to turn it into something that's toxic anyway? We cannot send it down south, that's for sure.
Thank you. And turning now to a floor question, if the Conservatives become a minority government, what would your party do in opposition to legislate an oil tanker ban? Andrew Lewis?
If the Conservatives are a minority, then it is conceivable that the opposition parties could actually get together and form a coalition and replace the Conservatives. I would encourage that.
And Bryony Penn, please.
I would consider that too. And what's more, I just wanted to point out that Lester B. Pearson, sorry?
Even though recently it's been the Liberals propping up the Conservatives for the most part.
Well, I guess we could argue about that. It was the NDP that did. You know what? I think that we're all beyond the partisan time. You know, the reason that I joined the Liberal Party is that there is a fantastic leader there that is willing to put the country before his own personal gain. We've got to get together. If we don't get together, it's the fate of the planet. And many people said, you know what, I don't care what color you are. You know, it's a crazy system that someone like Andrew and I are being pitted one against the other. It's a flawed system. It's the only one we have right now. October 14th is coming up. We've got to be smart. We've got to be smart before October 14th, and we've got to be smart after October 14th. It's critical. It's not the time to be cynical right now. It's the time to be smart, and it's the time to talk to people and find out what's going to be the best solution.
Jeremy Arney?
Well, I will be happy with a minority Conservative party only if the parties in opposition are going to force them to talk about the matters that they've been hiding for the last 2.5 years. If they're going to continue as a minority government with opposition not doing a darn thing about it and allowing them to go ahead with their secret plans and their secret desires and their boosting of the corporations and the destroying of the rights of the people of Canada, then it doesn't really matter what gets in, who gets in, because we are down the drain. We have to have an opposition, even with a minority government, who is willing to stand up to the people of Canada. If I should be happy enough or lucky enough to be that one person from the Canadian Action Party who goes back there, believe me, I am not going to sit down when the end of my 37 seconds comes if I haven't got the right answers from the people who are supposed to be answering them in the House of Commons. Won't happen, because the people of Canada are the most important. We need to send somebody back there who is going to look after our interests in this riding. That's what we need to do.
Well, that's an easy question for me because there's absolutely no chance that we're going to form the opposition. But you know what? Look to the future. We had 10 candidates and ridings across Canada. The last election, we've got 26 this time. Next time, we'll have 100. So we really do believe we represent the alternative point of view. But that's what I've been saying all along. There really is no difference between these candidates. And if they're so darn determined to vote anything but Liberal, which one of you two is willing to drop out of the race so that you can sweep this riding and just send the Conservatives packing? I don't see that happening.
BC Sustainable Energy Association. How urgent do you think the global climate crisis is, and how will your party's plans to tackle the crisis help Canada build a strong post-carbon economy? Andrew Lewis?
How serious is climate change? Well, it's been upon us for the last 20 years, and I think that people are beginning to realize that this is going to impact, it's impacting us now, and it's going to impact future generations. And we need to take some responsibility. We need to take a big responsibility for our footprint on the planet, and we need to look very closely at how we can move to a low-carbon future. And I'm confident that the Green Party, having especially over the last 10 years, has been able to bring up, help raise people's consciousness, enable other parties like the Liberal Party to cherry pick some of our ideas and help get our ideas into the mainstream. And that's why I think we can implement. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have a lot of hope. I do have a lot of hope. I believe in the creativity and the capacity for us to innovate and move towards a low-carbon economy and protect our environment and protect our and have sustainable communities. But we do need to work together on this.
Dale Weir?
Okay, well, I think we have to separate some fact from fiction here. Global warming didn't start 20 years ago, it started 10,000 years ago. Now, how many people here believe that CO2 is the most common greenhouse gas? You're right, it's water vapor. That is the single most impactful gas in the atmosphere on global warming. Now, when we want to talk about alternatives, let's just keep in mind, to replace 1/3 of our fossil fuels, you would require 32,850 wind turbines a year for 50 years.
That we were going to be changing in 1991. We've had 17 years of inaction, yes, including the Liberal government. And one thing the Liberal government proved above and beyond a doubt is that voluntary free market pressures do not work. So the climate change plan has been endorsed by Andrew Weaver. He's the Nobel Prize Award winner here. This plan has been endorsed by Mr. Weaver. I've been endorsed by Mr. Weaver. We've got to face the fact that if we have a Conservative majority, we're going to have very, very little action on climate change. And we've got to get going, and we've got to get going with someone who's going to be in government and get it done. And so I'm saying, recommending that everybody follow the lead and the advice and the recommendations of Elizabeth May is that we vote strategically in this election.
Okay, as I understand it, the question first was, what about global warming, climate change? Well, it's on us. It doesn't matter what the cause is, it's here. I personally don't think it's all to do with gases and emissions. I think it's largely to do with the sun, but that's not the point. The point is, it's here. And the second half of the question, if I understand it right, was what would our policy be after the carbon fiasco is done? Well, look to the future. Whatever you do, don't go back to the carbon again. Isn't that quite simple? We don't want to go backwards, we want to go forwards. And by getting out of the carbon disaster, if you like, that we're facing right now, we found a way forward. Let's keep going forward. Don't go backwards.
Thank you. We have an extraordinary heap of questions here. I'll try to keep everyone, if at all possible, as briefly as you possibly can. But here's the next question. Do you, and we only have about half an hour left before summation, do you and your party support national air care standards on all forms of transport in Canada, including ferries and freight? Bryony Tan?
Yes, and in fact there's, in the BC component of the plan, there's a commitment, because one of the biggest sources of both particulates and carbon are coming from the sulfur emissions in the huge and rising portion of traffic in our waters. So there's a commitment to getting a national Port Authority, a national recommendation that the port can enforce these sulfur emissions. Air care, it's a must. We've got to work on both emissions and particulate matter, and certainly there's a commitment on both those aspects. I think it's sometimes difficult for people to distinguish between the quality of air and carbon emissions, but those are two very different things that require different policy, and there's both in this plan.
Jeremy Arney, please.
Okay, on the subject of air quality, anybody familiar with chemtrails? Anybody seen any chemtrails up there? They're up there. That's man-made stuff up there. It's full of chemicals, weird and wonderful chemicals that are mind-altering. They're experimental stuff that's coming down, that's being dropped on you to change your mood, change your mind, make you do things you don't want to do and you're not even aware of it. So next time you're out there on a beautiful, blue, sunny day, look up and see if you can see some of these. They look like trails from jet planes. They're not. They don't disappear the way theirs do. They stay there all day. If you ever get down to Southern California, don't look up, because it'll scare you. The whole sky is crisscrossed with these things. So we're talking about air care down here. Let's start with the air care up there, because that's all coming down, and that's what's affecting a lot of the things that are happening down below us. You can feed all kinds of chemicals down that people are breathing in without even knowing about it. That's not a very serious, that's a very serious situation. We don't want that at all. As far as what's down here on the ground, things like emissions, yes, we can control those. We can get rid of them completely if we start using the right kind of vehicles. Thank you. I'm done again.
Thank you. Andrew Lewis?
Yes, my friend here might not like this, but the Green Party would amend the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to include the right to breathable air and drinkable water. This has to be a right for every Canadian. And we would amend we need to strengthen the CEPA, Canadian Environmental Protection Agency, to be able to regulate more forcefully particulates emitted into the air.
Thank you. And Dale Weir?
Well, the Libertarian Party would be against a national policy on limiting emissions and on air care. Certainly this is an area that's effectively covered by the various municipalities where it's relevant. And you look at the Lower Mainland of BC, look at Toronto, look at Montreal, look at any of your major cities. Not every problem has to be solved at the national level. And again, what we're against is mandatory policies that are imposed that we simply can't afford. And we're running into some real serious problems now. For example, in California, where now many truck manufacturers are simply saying, I won't sell into California anymore because we simply cannot meet the standards. So it's great to make these laws, but if you can't meet them and you can't achieve them, then really it's just pie in the sky talk. The other thing is also to say quickly, biofuels, unfortunately, are a canard. If you converted 100% of Canada's seed oils to biofuel, you would meet 2% of our transportation requirements. So, I mean, I'm sorry, just mandates from government don't always necessarily produce the results that you hope for.
Thank you. I think that's our list, right? Yes. We have a couple questions here on nuclear power, and perhaps with your indulgence, I'll try to combine them quickly. Gary Lunn and the Conservatives says, one, are big supporters of nuclear power. Is your party planning to expand nuclear power? And the second question, as a writer, is to discuss the question of starting nuclear construction in Alberta and East, and whether something can be done about, the person says, the BC taxpayers are on the hook for virtually all liability under current legislation. Would your party change this? So the question of nuclear power. Dale Weir.
Well, of course, as I said before, there's a link between energy and economy and the environment, and which particular set of influences do you want to have to deal with. Everybody wants a clean environment, everybody wants a low cost of living, and everybody wants a strong economy, but we have to be realistic. We have to examine and not blind ourselves to all options in this area. Look, we don't want tar sands, we don't want crude oil, we don't want hydro plants, we don't want nuclear. You know, as I've already pointed out, it's physically impossible to erect enough wind turbines and there aren't enough roofs in the world to put enough solar panels up to significantly replace fossil fuels. The future, I believe, is in fusion energy, which is not to be confused with fission. And no, we would not arbitrarily, again, put rules in place that say, no, you cannot explore this possible solution for our economic, environmental, and energy needs.
Thank you. Andrew Lewis.
Well, I've been natural resources critic on this and following the nuclear file, and Gary Lunn is indeed traveling around the world. He is Canada's can-do salesman, going around trying to sell can-do reactors in the Alberta tar sands and also in China, for example. And this is not, I think, the right way to go for Canada. The problem with nuclear power is it's not clean. It actually does produce a great deal of greenhouse gas emissions, especially in the mining of uranium. And it's not safe. We know that even around Ontario, there's tritium leaks in the watersheds around there. And of course, it's not economic. It costs billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. They all need subsidizing. There hasn't been a nuclear power plant built anywhere in the world without government subsidies. And of course, they take 10, 20 years to get online, and then after 30 years, they cost a fortune in being repaired. So that is not a future for our energy needs in Canada or anywhere around the world.
Thank you. Jeremy Arney.
I'm wondering what the point of the nuclear power stations is anyway, apart from feeding corporations and feeding Gary Lunn's enormous ego. I don't understand why we're even looking at such a thing. What are you going to do with the waste? I mean, we already have a problem with waste anyway. What are we going to do with the waste from the nuclear power plants? If we ship the power plant to China, are we going to take their waste back and try and deal with it? I believe there's a disposal plant or something of that nature in Alberta. Well, they of all people need it because they are so incredibly gung-ho, power, 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 power. I'm totally against nuclear power plants. I just cannot see the point of it. And if we're going to go back, and it is going back to use nuclear power plants, we're not going forward to find an alternative. Yes, Dale over there says there's not enough solar panels in the world, or roofs in the world, to be able to replace fossil fuel. How many fossil fuel plants are there, generators are there, that are producing electricity? I don't know, but I don't think there's too many.
So the real thing about energy is conservation. We've got to have sticks that bring down our consumption. And that's what the carbon tax is all about. The whole purpose behind the carbon tax and the commitment to developing the infrastructure on the public transit, which is, just to correct Andrew, is that the gateway commitment from the federal government is to provide money for public transit and the infrastructure. Mr. Dale has made it very clear that this is not for freeway expansion. This is to improve the public transit system. So we've got to do it. We've got to reduce our consumption. I'm adamantly against nuclear power. We haven't found, for all the same reasons that Andrew has mentioned. My own experience, we've got a wonderful nuclear chemist in this region who's worked on all the nuclear power plants, and he himself says there's no future in nuclear. Uranium is a finite supply.
Yes, a brief rebuttal.
Sure. I was just wanting to say thank you to Andrew for coming over the dark side of being against subsidies. And for Mr. Arney, you talk about electric vehicles. Electricity has to come from somewhere, and that's where the notion of solar panels comes in.
Okay, thank you. A question now away from energy on the sustainability of aquaculture. Where does your party stand on the sustainability of aquaculture? Brian Penn?
Great question, thank you. The Oceans Act was originally written to protect the ocean and the migratory species of the ocean, which include salmon. And the Oceans Act kind of lost its way over the years. In 2005, I think we were just beginning to find our way with the Oceans Action Plan, where it was putting the protection of wild species at the top. And that's been there's been a recommitment to get away from the schizophrenia that's been evident in fisheries and oceans, where on the one hand they were promoting aquaculture, on the other hand trying to protect wild salmon species. There's a very clear commitment in this that we've got to protect our wild salmon stocks. And so to that end, any form of aquaculture that puts wild salmon stocks at risk will be against the Oceans Act. And Alex Morton is currently, right now, in court contesting that very matter. It's a complicated one because we've got a provincial government doing some of the licensing and the federal government doing others.
Thank you. Andrew Lewis?
Well, there is some aquaculture that it is a benefit to the economy. I'm thinking of shellfish. We need to restore some of the fisheries around our islands around here and restore the clam beds, for example. On salmon aquaculture, the Green Party is saying we need to put a moratorium on any more open net cages in the ocean, and we need to phase out the existing fisheries, the salmon fisheries, the aquaculture fisheries.
Thank you. Jeremy Arney?
Got the right thing here. So has anybody ever thought what those poor fish feel like? Probably something like a battery chicken that's in someplace being forced to produce eggs. Canadian Action Party doesn't actually have a particular platform on this, but I do. My feeling is that if as much money was spent as has been spent on the salmon aquaculture, whatever it's called, fishery culture, growing tame salmon, as looking after the wild salmon and protecting them, we wouldn't need the fish farms.
Well, the Libertarian Party, I'm not sure exactly has a specific position on this, other than to say that it is possible to have sustainable aquaculture. Again, closed pens are entirely acceptable. Inland aquaculture can be achieved, and open ocean aquaculture can be achieved. And these can all be done without threatening coastal areas.
Surely the salmon would like to be live according to libertarian principles too.
I said we're in favor of human rights, not necessarily fish rights.
Thank you. I will turn now to three separate questions, which I think all speak to a similar theme that are directed at Andrew Lewis, but of course other candidates can comment afterwards. One is asking about why candidates aren't being run in all of the ridings up for the general elections today. A second is concerned about whether you have a view on strategic voting. And that speaks to the third question as well, which is whether you have some thoughts on the organizational challenges that you face in trying to beat Gary Lunn in this election. So some comments from you, Mr. Lewis, and then rebuttals if anyone else has a comment.
Well, the first question was about a full slate of candidates. I haven't actually been following that. I don't know how many candidates we have across the country. I have a campaign to run here, and that is my focus. I think we got something like 300 candidates, but I don't know. 303. Great. I think that's a great achievement, virtually a full slate. On strategic voting, I think anybody who advises you to vote strategically is, how can I put this?
Disingenuous.
What they're doing is unethical. What they're doing is they are asking you to betray, to be dishonest about your true values and beliefs. And so I think it's fundamentally wrong for anybody to be asking you to vote strategically. Unless, of course, they're saying vote strategically for the Greens, because we might be. organizationally, as a small party, there are always organizational challenges, and this campaign has actually been like night and day compared to the 2006 election, and I'm very, very grateful for the volunteers that have come forward. We have an adequately funded campaign, and I think we're going up against the big guys and getting heard, and I'm very satisfied with the campaign so far.
Any comments from the other candidates? Dale Lear? Yep.
I'd say I'm all in favor of diversity, especially at the political level, and I think if you wanted to send a message to Ottawa, you know, the Liberals have had their time at bat, the Conservatives have certainly had their round. Maybe it's time to try somebody different.
Okay, other comments?
Ladies first, come on. For this particular election, we have a job to do, and that is to send somebody back to Ottawa who's going to represent us. For future elections, if we have them, and there's a chance that we won't, this might be the very last election we have as Canada. And I'm not trying to frighten you, but if 2010 comes around and we haven't done something about it, we will be part of the North American Union. But our job right now is to send back to Ottawa, for what time is left, the very best person to represent you. And you are the only one who can dig into your heart and into your mind and decide who that person is going to be. And this voting for somebody to get rid of Mr. Lunn is very well and good, but is that what you really want to do in your last election?
Brian, again? No? Oh, okay. Thank you. So then, a couple of questions on the oil and gas industry. One is simply, what is your party's position on the billions in subsidies to the oil and gas industry? And then there's a reference to the survival of big oil in the face of anti-combines legislation, and a question about what can you and your party do on our behalf to stop their control. Andrew Lewis?
I need to hear that again, sorry.
Yes, the total question, the second question was, let's cut to the chase. Big oil has run the planet for 100 years. They have survived anti-combines legislation and still run the show. Can you stop their control? Andrew Lewis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I agree very much with the premise of this question, which is why I think we need to elect MPs who are not beholden to the party whip. And what I mean is that we need somebody who is beholden to the constituency in between elections, not just at election time. And the problem with the Conservatives and the Liberals is that they are beholden to the party leader and the party system, not to the constituents during elections. And we should stop electing politicians and start electing public servants, people who are ready to serve you. That is one step that we can do to break the hegemony of the oil corporations. And I also, one suggestion in our platform is to bring in about a corporate social responsibility act, so that at the moment, Canadian companies are going around the world abusing environmental and social standards around the world, and also within Canada. So let's have a corporate social responsibility act so that corporations are responsible to our social and environmental values.
Thank you. Jeremy Arney?
Well, the oil companies have been doing it for 100 years or so, you've so rightly pointed out whoever the questioner was. And the only way that we're really going to stop that is to stop using them, which means we have to find an alternative means. And we also would be wise to find those alternative means in such a way that they can't control them. Because if we allow them to control those alternative means, they will slowly but surely, carefully, casually, wean us back to where they have total control of the oil. This just, it is fundamental. If you try and come up with combines and things like that, Combines Act, to try and destroy them, you're going to lose. Because you have to go back to the basics. Where's the money come? Follow the money right back. And they have the money, farmer has the money, insurance has the money, the banks have the money. We all have the right to shut down anything, any company, any business that we want by not supporting it. So if you can get away from having a car which is automatically using one of their products, you can get away from oil heating your home that doesn't require their products, and you don't use them, who are they going to sell them to?
Thank you very much. Bryony Penn?
Yeah, the Liberal Party's introduced the social corporate responsibility. Is it an act? Is it an amendment? I get confused sometimes. So it's basically the same commitment that companies have to act with a triple bottom line. I'm also very keen on a very specific piece of legislation that's come out of Australia that I think we could use, which is where there is a financial disclosure requirement that stockholders or shareholders rather have to be informed about the nature of their stock. So when they go to buy a stock, they have to be informed about the environmental and social audit of record of that company. In Australia, it changed people's buying habits overnight. Again, we're cutting subsidies to oil sands, banning tanker traffic, green shift, tax carbon, fund the conversion that Dale has painted as some kind of apocalyptic. In Denmark, it wasn't apocalyptic. I've been watching it for 17 years. It's a very sleepy little communities with windmills. It's not apocalyptic. We also have to deal with poverty, and I'm quite glad that someone who doesn't respect fish isn't endorsing me.
Thank you. And Dale Lear?
Well, you know, believe it or not, we actually might have an issue that we all agree on. The Libertarian Party is very, very clear. We are totally opposed to subsidies. And, you know, one of the things that I got involved in this whole process is because I've observed over the years that there's an unholy trinity between big government, big business, and big labor. And I'm fundamentally opposed to that. I find that undemocratic, and I think it thwarts our economic freedoms and our personal freedoms and our political choices. So by all means, we should be using our dollars to select those types of companies who we do support. Again, the Libertarian Party is entirely different. We wouldn't dictate how you should live and what sort of products you should buy and how you should go about your life. So we're really quite the polar opposite of as they say, the big brands. So as I say, we've seen too many campaign promises from the same old parties over and over and over, and yet they really do nothing at the end of the day. So I really think we need to look now to small business, to small government, and to individuals to solve our problems and start going back to the mothership for the solution of all the things that we see troubling us.
Okay, I've been asked to choose amongst 5 questions here. Terrible thing to have to do. Indeed. Why don't I ask a general question about organizing for the environment? What do you think the number of people in this room says about local concern for the environment and politics' role in it? If you are elected, will there be more or fewer people here in 4 years' time, and why? Okay. So I will ask Jeremy Arney, please.
The price of apathy towards public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. The relatively small number of people that are here today speaks of apathy. It also speaks of the fact that politics is very, very boring. There is no fun in politics because it's ruled by people who have no touch, no common touch with the people. So 4 years from now, if there isn't an election 4 years from now, I would expect a much larger crowd here because people have decided that it's their country, their future, their environment, and their lives for their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren. That's why I'm here today. And yes, it is a relatively small crowd, but it could be only 1 or 2 people. So for those who are here, thank you for coming.
Well, you know, it is a concern because I know environment is extremely important to everybody. We all share it. It's all important to us. Without a healthy environment, you can't have a healthy society. And so, you know, make no mistake, that is a very strong concern of mine. But, you know, I really believe the reason there's a low turnout here is because people have essentially given up. Again, you look back to the past 50 years of big government, and there's been an environmental contamination, all right. The political environment has been poisoned, and people have basically lost faith in the political process, and they really don't believe that they can make a difference anymore. And that's where, again, the Libertarian Party would be different. If we're elected in 4 years from now, I'd like to see a far greater turnout, because again, the source of good ideas And the source of responses to our problems don't come top down from the government. They come from people, they come from individuals. And the best way you can make sure the environment and the economy and everything rolls out the way you want it to is using your income and voting with your dollars every day when you go to the marketplace.
Bravo.
Andrew Lewis.
I got involved in politics because I thought there was a big disconnect between local NGOs, environmental groups, community groups, and what is needed at the political level. We do lack any kind of political leadership, I think, in this country that deals with some of the really pressing issues, such as the environmental degradation that we're seeing around the world. And that is why I'm involved in politics. It is frustrating. I've been involved now for 10 years, trying to build on the momentum as people become more and more aware of some of these critical issues that we face. And I feel very hopeful, actually. I am still here. I feel very hopeful. I think there is a groundswell, a movement that is happening. And what we need is to get more people involved, is we need leaders who inspire and who give hope. And I sincerely believe that's what the Green Party platform does, and that's what Elizabeth May brings to the Greens and to politics in Canada.
Thank you.
That's a multifaceted question, and it's one that I'd love to ponder more on. I'm not going to be able to answer it in 1 minute adequately, but when I go door to door, every door that I greet, no one's not thinking about the environment, and no one's not thinking about how they're struggling in terms of a lot of the families that I knock on the door. They've got so many other issues in their lives, but it's not that environment isn't important. What's happened now is that environment has become a mainstream topic of most people, and that's what I'm hearing time after time after time. John Ralston Saul said to me once, I was interviewing him, and he said, Bryony, you can't, no movement is going to survive until you get into the hubble bubble of a mainstream political tent, test out your ideas, and get them into the sort of the public discourse. And I think Elizabeth May is doing a fabulous job of getting into the public discourse. I think Stéphane Dion is doing a wonderful job of getting it into the public discourse. These are leaders that we really need to admire. They're courageous people. I'm hoping by the quality of the candidates that are going to be there that we're going to reinvigorate politics, because the plans now make sense.
And with that, thank you very much. With that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to close questions. I realize not all questions have been posed and answered. Perhaps there'll be some time to address these questions in other fora. Now we turn to the 2-minute summations, and we'll proceed in reverse order from your introductory remarks, which means I'll ask Bryony Penn to speak first.
Well, I think I've given the speech already. Again, it was Dion that stood up and fought for Elizabeth May to be at that leadership debate. He insisted. No other party leader was there to back her. That to me is courageous leadership. He was doing nothing to support his own bid for leadership, but it's because he feels that this is an important debate, and that she is someone that articulates the nature of the debate very, very well. And in Elizabeth May's own, her leadership is in the sense that she has said, I do not want to sit and look at a majority slate of Conservatives. This time is too critical. We have to put the environment ahead of party politics and partisan politics that time. That's why there's a movement sweeping across Canada that says we have to be strategic. And it doesn't matter if it's, as Andrew pointed out, you know, both of us, of course, are asking for the NDP vote, or the, you know, my Liberal vote, or the Green vote, or the PC vote. But I think that we do. October 14th is an important time. I have the backing of most, in fact, I think all of the national organizations and local organizations that are trying to find a way for confused local voters from the progressive, from the center to the left, knowing where to put their vote. And I take that responsibility very, very seriously. I think that this is a very, very challenging time. It's not easy to take what John Ralston Saul had said was, a fringe topic like the environment, which was 10 years ago, we were fringe, into the mainstream and hold your head on every single issue. But, people know that I'm so committed to this. I haven't wavered since I've been about 8 years old on this issue. So they know that I'm going to be representing green values, NDP values, liberal values. It's the future, which I think is a nonpartisan approach.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you coming out this afternoon, and I just want to thank again the organizers for this opportunity to, for a change, talk about the environment in a forum, which is very refreshing for me. And as I think I've already said, I've been campaigning now for almost 10 years, trying to bring about green ideas and green values to my riding, Sanish Gulf Islands. And what I found over the years is that most people are what I call small g greens. They actually understand the issues. They understand some of the complex problems we face. What the difficulty with voting green in the past is like any party, any small party, it's about building trust. And I think over the years, this, by being consistent, by being principled and staying true to my beliefs and my values and communicating what I believe in and trying to reach out to people on green issues, I think I am beginning to build that trust to help make a breakthrough in this election. And it's fantastic that other parties are adopting our policies. This is wonderful. This is why voting green continues to be so important, because really I don't believe we can affect change from within some other party. The only thing that the Liberals, for example, listen to is the threat of losing votes. And by continuing to vote green, you are actually helping push other parties into adopting green principles and green values and green ideas. So in this election, we have a remarkable opportunity to actually elect a Green in this riding. This is one of the top 5 ridings in Canada, and the Green Party of Canada has acknowledged that. We're running a strong campaign, and we're up there with the other guys, and we think by defeating Gary Lunn and electing a Green will make the biggest change. If you want to vote Green, you may as well vote for the real thing. Thank you.
Okay, well, as I said before, I'm your most reluctant candidate because I'm not here to try and get my hands on the public purse so that I can use your tax dollars, your hard-earned dollars, to direct how you should live your lives. The Libertarian Party is against subsidies. We don't believe government has any particular great skill that allows it to pick the economic winners and losers. We're against taxing successful businesses to prop up ones that probably shouldn't be there. I'm particularly against the notion of using individual taxpayers' dollars, the deductions of hard-working men and women to lay bets on what the next big thing is going to be. I don't think government has that magic, or they don't have that ability. And it's very interesting. I don't know if you watched the debate last night, but Stéphane Dion said something that actually I agree with. But of course, with everything, context is very important. But what he said is the government cannot choose who it will help. Now, it was in the context of the arts funding, and I think what he meant to imply is that Stephen Harper should give money to every artist out there who wants to make their living that way. But the point is absolutely correct. The government cannot and should not choose who it will help. It should treat everyone equally. The government should be an objective broker of individual rights and freedoms, and it should not be out there playing favorites, because that's what happens. There isn't enough money in the world to give every vocal interest group everything that they want. So the only fair solution to do is to allow the economy to sort things out, to allow the winners to generate the wealth that's needed so that we can have a healthy economy, so that we have money for jobs and investment, so that we have money for new clean energy, so that we have money for transportation, so that we can have the things that make life important to us and worth living. So that's why I'm in this thing, is to try and open up the debate, because I'm sorry, the same old tired brands can't be trusted to come up with anything new.
Thank you. Jeremy Arney.
You should have been there at Salt Spring Day. It's fun. So this is largely about the environment. And I should tell you that my grandfather wrote books when he was a professor of biology at Southampton University in England that for about 70 years were close to being the standard curriculum in all the schools there in England. My father was a botanist in Cardiff University, and he loved anything to do with plants. He grew strawberries that came to fruit in December, so we'd have them at Christmas time. In a way, he was a sort of father of hydroponics, and he laughed when I suggested that to him. I can put plants in the ground and they grow, but I don't really care about them. Well, let me rephrase that. I haven't really cared about them until I got a daughter who is passionate, really passionate about the environment, about sustainable growth, about growing. She has a little plot, tiny little plot in Victoria, which she grows her entire year's vegetables. How she does it, I don't know, but she does it. And she has basically kicked my butt until I'm interested in the environment and everything that goes with it. So though I talk a lot about the really important issues for me, which are still Canada, being Canadian, being free, not being tied to another country, not being ruled by another country, having an open, completely open government, which is for the people, by the people, those are really important to me. Having an economy run by our own bank, that is really important to me. I still have to come back to what this is all about, the environment. It is becoming a passion of mine. These lakes, I'm sort of wondering how on earth, where to go from here. How do we get this increasingly impossible government to talk to listen to what they are really doing? How do we get the media to talk about this kind of stuff? Why is there a blanket, a solid blanket between the ordinary people and our government? And I think the reason is that we've allowed our government to take complete control of Canada without us being involved. And that has to change. That's why I'm running. As I said, my kids, my grandchildren, they deserve better.
So with those comments, we close the main speaking portion of this afternoon's session. We have a brief announcement, and then we'll turn to thanking our guests.
Yeah, hi, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and say, you know, the environment is a voting issue for us, and don't be discouraged because you don't see a lot of people in this room, because to tell you honestly, we had such a short turnaround time to get this organized and advertised. But what I can tell you is that there's 2 more debates coming on that are specifically about the issue of the environment. So please make note of these 2. I'll just announce them quickly. The first is for the federal all candidates of the Victoria region. It's at the Metro Studio Theatre, which is at 1411 Quadra at Johnson on Monday, October 6th at 7 p.m. And the second will again...
all 3 ridings?
No, just for the Victoria riding. And then the next one that I'm announcing is the same constituency, and that's going to be at the Mary Winspear Centre, which is in Sydney at 2243 Beacon Avenue. So please, if you have friends and family who are, you know, worried about the environment and where this is a voting issue for them, please let them know and bring them out to those debates. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. With that, you've already started. I meant to say, to ask everyone to thank our guests for coming and keeping our minds sharp and our questions rigorous. And to also remind you that there is a table outside where I believe there are documents from the different parties. So with that, thanks to our 4 guests. And please follow this issue and follow this campaign.